The network and the peer learning component has really persisted, as well as an emergence of the niche that state-based community partners have carved out in their work with farmers and farmers market capacity. So, yeah, I think that peer learning piece is just has emerged as something that is really valuable to the market managers that we work with.
Hello, this is Maura Henn, NCAT Local Food Systems Specialist, and in this episode of Voices from the Field, I am joined by my NCAT colleague, Tammy Howard, a Sustainable Agricultural Specialist. I don't think it's an overstatement to say that Tammy and I share a passion for working with farmers markets. In fact, I first joined NCAT in 2019 to work with Tammy on a project to build farmers market capacity in Montana. In today's conversation, we will discuss some of the resources we have developed for farmers market managers and vendors, tools and strategies for farmers market success, as well as some of the things that we have learned along the way. Tammy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for getting us together for this conversation, Maura. I'm so excited to be talking with you about our work with farmers markets in Montana and local foods.
Yeah, I am too. It's great to be able to do this. So to get started, can you share a little bit about yourself and what brought you to your work at NCAT?
Yeah, I came to NCAT from a long stint of farming and nonprofit work throughout the country. I have a degree in horticulture, and it provided a foundation, but I really wanted to focus on applying those skills. So I spent a fair amount of time market gardening, mainly in central New York and New York State, and worked with agriculture nonprofits to supplement my income. After working at Prescott College, at a farm in Chino Valley, Arizona, I was excited to stumble on the horticulture specialist position at NCAT, and that was 19 years ago. I haven't left because I love the work and the mission of NCAT.
That is a really great long tenure at NCAT. You definitely have been such a great resource for me as I have been learning about nonprofit work and local food systems work. I'm just curious, so what led you to focusing specifically on farmers markets and farmers market vendors in Montana?
Shortly after I was hired, I started working on a pilot project to get SNAP set up at farmers markets throughout the state. We worked with partners like the Community Food and Agriculture Coalition, which is now Farm Connect, and Arrow, which is now Abundant Montana, in the state to develop a system that was being tested throughout the country, basically to get farmers markets to get authorized to accept SNAP on behalf of all of the vendors at the market. At that point, they had transitioned, the national food stamp program had transitioned to a card-based system, and they called it SNAP. And this may be old news, but when SNAP first transitioned to a card-based system, it was really challenging for farmers market vendors because of the expense of becoming authorized and the equipment that was required to process SNAP payments. So in the pilot, we worked with markets to manage that card swipe system, and we provided a grant for they call it the processing system or POS system, so that individual vendors didn't have to get authorized and to pay for that expensive equipment to process the SNAP cards. We also started working with markets and getting them together to just discuss the best practices and learn from each other, specifically focused on accepting SNAP. But that peer learning component combined with an evident desire to create more capacity around things like vendor communications, marketing and outreach, and such led to the founding of what we loosely organized and called the Farmers Market Network in Montana.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing that. What brought you to working with markets and market vendors? So the project that I initially worked on with you back in 2019 was aimed at increasing farmers market capacity and building peer network opportunities. And that was funded through a farmers market promotion grant through the USDA. And then our second project, I think that started in 2021. That was during COVID, so a little foggy.
Yeah, it was like right after COVID, I think,
Right. So
started to become a full-blown,
you're
pandemic.
right.
Yeah,
That's right. Because we did have to change some things in the second project was really
exactly.
yeah. So that one was really focused on sustaining the success that was developed in that first project. And you've mentioned a couple of things already, but just, really dialing in on like what were some of the specific challenges that you saw for farmers markets when you first started this work, and just how have things changed in that time? So kind of looking back and looking at where we are now.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest and persistent challenges is that most market managers throughout Montana are volunteers. So that leads to burnout and a high market manager turnover. We tried to deal with this challenge in the sustaining farmers market success, that second farmers market promotion program, through doing a market manager cost share, and found that some of those challenges, it wasn't just paying a market manager salary. It was just a lot of burnout and challenges related to being a market manager. So we find the best success in all of the challenges that you and I identified come from markets that actually have a dedicated market manager that is paid. And many of these are through some kind of fiscally sponsored local community-based organization. The network and the peer learning component has really persisted, as well as an emergence of the niche that state-based community partners have carved out in their work with farmers and farmers market capacity. So, yeah, I think that peer learning piece is just has emerged as something that is really valuable to the market managers that we work with. And so, for example, Abundant Montana, which I mentioned above, is now the main go to for online outreach and marketing of local foods in Montana. And Farm Connect, which I also mentioned above, they worked with us in that initial pilot, works with low income local food access through their Double Snap Dollars program. And then you and I, Maura, we continue to focus on that peer learning and networking. So I think one thing that has changed, or is that has improved, and is market managers have so many more resources to draw from to make their market successful, as well as a platform to connect and share on what's worked and lessons learned. And we try to do that on an annual basis.
That's great, Tammy. Thank you. And yeah, I mean, we're one of the states that does not have a farmers market association. As you mentioned, it's more of a network. We've kind of been the sort of the supporting agency of that network. And I mean, we've definitely have received a lot of feedback from managers that having the annual networking meeting. We've been doing peer learning calls in the summer virtually for people to come together and just kind of ask questions. And we've really seen that value of the peer network is really important. And I think I just had a conversation with another one of our partners at Mission West, Blake Lineweaver, talking about business structures for farmers markets. And we'll link that episode in the show notes. But we have a lot of markets that are forming cooperatives with their vendors, which is just like another way to build that support for their market manager as well. So I feel like, we've definitely have seen some really great improvements in capacity for our markets in Montana.
Yeah, and Another resource that both you and I worked on is that farmersmarketmt.com, which is kind of like a one-stop shop for farmers market managers and vendors throughout the state. And I would say it is the only resource in Montana that focuses specifically on farmers markets. There's all of our partners that we mentioned, they all do work with farmers markets, but they also do other marketing and value chain coordination. So I think this is in and of itself a really great resource that we've developed as part of these projects that you mentioned.
Yeah, we'll definitely make sure to link that as well. And in building that resource, we created a lot of individual or specialized focused on Montana markets, but we also linked to great resources from all across the country from other states that have successful farmers market programs. So for listeners that are not in Montana, it's still worth it to check it out because maybe you'll find a resource on there. On that topic, I'd love to kind of turn to some of the specific lessons we've learned about working with markets, really specifically farmers market vendors. We have some great resources on farmersmarketmt.com about this. And, I work mostly with our market managers in Montana, kind of helping with capacity. And Tammy, you really focus on the vendors and the producers. So just kind of getting started. First up, how does a producer decide if a farmer's market is the right fit for them?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think one of the very first and important questions in market evaluation. So, in my work with producers and new food-based businesses on their marketing strategies, I always start with asking them about their ideal customer. Who is their ideal customer, and where is that customer shopping? So, if their ideal customer values like local food and wants to know the producer, farmers markets might be a good fit. So, after you kind of evaluate that customer, thinking about that strategy of where and how to sell to them and what they're looking for, and the niche or how you can turn that your ideal customer's pains into a gain, right? So farmers markets can be a good low risk place to sell at, but there can also be a lot of competition. So one of the first things I suggest is looking at the market that you're considering selling at and visiting that market. Another really important consideration is the time that it takes to sell at farmers markets. So, an example is when my husband and I started Nana Louie Farm, which is still operational, but mainly focused on flowers. We started selling at farmers markets in our area, but since we both had off farm jobs, we quickly learned that the money we made at the market didn't offset the time we spent preparing and sitting at the market. And that's a really important consideration. Another important consideration is whether or not you enjoy interacting with people. So, if you're more of an introvert, we definitely suggest thinking of a marketing strategy that doesn't involve interacting directly with the consumer. But for some producers and food-based businesses, this is the most enjoyable part of their marketing strategies. So, just having an understanding of what your goals and personality and lifestyle all combine to help figure out the marketing strategy that's best for you.
Those are really great suggestions to kind of keep in mind. I really feel the introvert piece of it. I've managed a farmer's market in the past and also have helped do some of the vending piece of it, which I did enjoy, but it really would zap you or zap me at the end of the market day. So those are things to really consider. So once a vendor a small food-based business, once someone has decided that a farmer's market is the right fit, what are some of the strategies that they should be considering to ensure their success at the market? Like you said, there can be a lot of competition. So what are some things that these vendors can do to see a good return on their time investment?
Yeah, as I mentioned, in the previous answer, I definitely encourage folks to check out the market that they're considering selling at. That's one of the very first steps. And if you're trying to figure out which market is best and where those local markets are, I definitely encourage you to look at local foods listings. Like, for example, our premier local food listing in Montana is called Abundant Montana. Most states have a local food listing service, so you can find that by simply doing a Google search. And then once you're at the market, talk to that market manager. Consider what is missing and how your product can fill that niche. I always like to use an example of a beginning farmer that I profiled for a beginning farmer program in North Carolina. They're called Tumbling Shoals Farms. And when they started looking for a permanent place to start their farm, they had what we like to call a practice farm and on rented land. And when they started looking to buy and purchase that permanent farm, they had the luxury of spending a year evaluating the markets in the area where they were looking to purchase. So they visited the local farmers market a few times during the season, and they saw that the market really didn't have a whole lot of produce in the shoulder seasons. So they knew that that could be a really great niche, and they put in their business plan and their cash flow, the cost of installing a few hoop houses, and they focused on early and late season products. And that was the niche that they created within their new market. Another suggestion, and a lot of these topics are available in the vendor resource guide on farmersmarketmt.com. But another really important thing for vendors to think about is like creating a display that is enticing and draws the customer's eye. So those displays can be really important. So I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a farmer's market and there's like zucchinis and a few pieces of garlic or what have you. And really abundance is what creates and draws the consumer's eye. So even if you are don't have as much product to just pile 4 feet high, for example, like a pile of carrots, try to figure out ways to use your display and use props to make sure that that sense of abundance is still available. And there's lots of tips and pictures and such on the uh, on the creating winning displays lesson at farmersmarketmt.com. So I did want to mention that as another key to, just drawing the customer's eye and creating something that helps attract a new customer as well as, keeping committed customers.
And that's a great example of kind of evaluating a market, looking for a gap or an opportunity, and like building a relationship or starting to build a relationship with the market manager. And that makes me that kind of leads to the next question about, there's a lot of partnership building, a lot of relationship building that has to happen for markets to be successful. And we've talked about, market managers being volunteers, and if they are paid, it's a part-time job. So just from the vendor perspective, and do you have any suggestions or advice for ensuring that the market manager vendor relationship remains productive?
Regarding the relationship between vendors and market managers, I did mention before that it's really important for the vendor, or if you're looking at a specific market, to reach out to the market manager well before the market season has started. So most markets will have some kind of vendor form to fill out, and I definitely suggest not waiting until the last minute to submit that. As you mentioned, Maura, and I mentioned as well, market managers a lot of times are volunteers, so they appreciate just having a little bit of time to process the vendor applications. And market managers, like any other marketing strategy that you're working on, expect you to follow through with your commitment. So if you are not able to attend a market, and for whatever reason, if you can let the market manager know well in advance, they will definitely appreciate that. If you say you will be at the market every week, but only show up half the time, that makes it really difficult for the market manager who is managing where to put the vendors every week. So just, keep the market manager in your mind when you're trying to communicate and decide when and how often you're going to be at that market. Another thing is knowing and respecting the market rules and regulations. It may seem arduous, but they are there because the manager, and if the board helped create those regulations, they just want to create a fair and safe environment for all the vendors. So, yeah, just knowing and understanding those rules will go a long way in creating a good relationship with the market manager. As a market manager, Mara, did I miss anything, or do
No.
you think there's some other tips that vendors should know?
Yeah, no, I think those were all really, really great. And the only thing I would add, really just to complement that, is, your market manager, I so appreciate you mentioning the rules and working with the board, because the manager is really, yes, they're managing the daily operations, but they're also kind of the liaison between the market organization and maybe the local, the local government or the municipality. So if they are working with a health inspector or a city sanitarian, it's really the market manager who has to communicate with that person to make sure that any rules and regulations are being followed. So having good partnership with vendors is makes it so much easier as a market manager. And because also I think the managers are also really advocates for the vendors in a lot of ways as well. So they really are on the vendor side. They want you to be successful. So, working together to make sure that everyone is following the rules and helping each other out, I think is really, that leads to even more market success for everybody. And I think this really segues nicely into the next part of our conversation, which is marketing strategies for farmers markets. You and I, Tammy, we're currently working with a cohort of about 7 markets, I think, market managers and community organizations in Montana to implement the Montana Harvest of the Month program at farmers markets. Harvest of the Month has typically functioned more at the K-12 public school level, with some implementation at grocery stores and food pantries. And so, for our listeners who are not familiar with it, the Harvest of the Month program is available in many states. And it's a program that has the goal to increase consumption and awareness of nutritious foods. And in some states, like Montana, the program focuses on foods that are grown or raised in that state. So in Montana, a few of the foods that we feature are lentils, bison, and cherries, which are grown in Northwest Montana. And Harvest of the Month implements a combination of education, materials, taste tests, and hands on activities to really encourage children and adults to try new foods. We're really like just launching this program that we've had for a number of years that's been successful in these other sites into this farmers market setting. And so, Tammy, can you talk a little bit about what our goals are of having Harvest of the Month at farmers markets?
Yeah, NCAT and Montana Team Nutrition have adapted the Harvest of the Month program for a few different venues like grocery stores and other institutions. And we've been trying to figure out how to adapt this program for in a farmers market setting because it really is an ideal arena to promote local products and also provide some resources to help vendors elevate the products that they're already producing. And I think one really great thing about Harvest of the Month is that it helps elevate a specific product, but it the at the K through 12 level, the students are learning about a product, and a lot of times in a farm to school setting, the producer is coming in and talking to the students about what they're producing, and that can segue into a consumer recognizing and understanding those products at the farmers market level. So, basically creating an opportunity for cross sector marketing for producers. And the project that we're working on is funded through a specialty crop block grant program, which is kind of hard to say, and focuses mainly on specialty crops. So most of the Harvest of the Month products, at least in Montana, are specialty crops, but a few are not. So beef, dairy, and grains are examples of products that are not specialty crops. So we're helping the markets involved in this cohort adapt to more of a weekly highlight because instead most farmers markets operate on anywhere in Montana between 8 to 18 weeks. And so the season, it's not a year-long monthly highlight. So we're encouraging the markets to kind of adapt the products into a weekly highlight of specific products. Another thing is this cohort, we really want to learn from them and kind of extend our peer learning component of our work with farmers markets. So we're hoping to gather those markets at the end of the year and learn what worked best and what can be improved. And then this will actually help us expand the program and help markets throughout the state be successful as we expand it into the next year and beyond.
Thank you. It's really exciting to see the market so inspired by the resources that are available. We can link the Harvest of the Month website so folks can look at the resources that we have. But as I mentioned earlier, a lot of states have Harvest of the Month programs. So for our listeners outside of Montana, where would they find out if the program is available to them in their state?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Most Harvest of the Month programs are focused mainly on the K through 12 arena. So, reaching out to your state farm to school coordinator would be my first suggestion. And we partner a lot with the National Farm to School Network and other programs and building farmers' capacity to sell to schools. So I would definitely suggest looking at the National Farm to School Network to find a farm to school coordinator in your state. And of course, there's also the opportunity of just Googling your state plus Harvest of the Month, and you can find specifically a Harvest of the Month program coordinator that way as well.
It's been sort of a goal of mine since I started at NCAT and learned about our Harvest of the Month program. It was really clear to me that this would be just such a great resource to implement at farmers markets. It's just so adaptable, and it's just like you mentioned, a great way to kind of bridge the gap between the farm to school and the local food, like the purchasing of local foods in a community. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with all of it.
Yeah, and
It
I would also say that I think we're one of the few states that are implementing a Harvest of the Month at farmers markets. So that's why we really wanted to work with a smaller group of farmers market managers just to see how we could figure out how to adapt the program in more of like a weekly setting. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see what the market managers have to share at the end of the season.
I'm certain we're going to get some really great feedback. So, just more generally, do you have any recommendations or favorite resources for our listeners regarding farmers market vendors, just anything that, people should definitely check out?
So, for farmers markets at the national scale, I definitely suggest looking at the Farmers Market Coalition. They're a great resource, and I would say they're at the cutting edge of farmers market capacity building and resources throughout the country. They have so many resources on working with vendors and metrics and legal strategies for farmers markets that they're just a really great resource and have their finger on the pulse of what is happening nationally and all the innovations that farmers markets are implementing throughout the country. So definitely check that out. And then, of course, we mentioned a few times we have a lot of great resources for market managers to get started, as well as a toolkit for vendors at farmersmarketnt.com. A lot of the stuff and skills and resources we've been talking about are featured there on that web page. And then focusing on Harvest of the Month and Farm to School. You mentioned Harvest of the Month in Montana, and there's awesome recipes and uh, tip sheets and all sorts of things for vendors that that are thinking about highlighting different crops. And then finally, ATTRA has a lot of resources on just marketing in general on our local foods topic page. We have resources for producers that want to sell into other intermediate markets like other institutions, food hubs, restaurants, etc. And if you're still on the fence about which marketing channel is best for you, we have actually a series of tip sheets that focus on 13 different marketing channels. They're 2 pages. They discuss the pros and cons and provide tips on getting started with various marketing channels. So I definitely suggest checking that out. And then, of course, we have a host of other really great podcasts and YouTube videos related to marketing on ATTRA's website.
Yeah, those are Yeah, those are all great resources. And also, people can always reach out to us on our chat line or our ATTRA 1-800 phone line as well. And we love talking to people. And I would love to add, just as kind of a general resource for if you are looking to start a market, looking to start to vend at a market, see if your state has a farmers market network or an association. You can find a full list of those or a pretty complete list on the Farmers Market Coalition website that you mentioned, Tammy. But a few I'd love to plug is the Oregon Farmers Market Association, Community Farm Alliance in Kentucky, and the Virginia Farmers Market Association. Those three have really inspired and informed a lot of the work that we've done in our last couple of farmers market promotion programs. Oregon and Kentucky have shared some of their tools and resources with us for doing some metrics and cost sharing. So like really grateful to them. And it's just, if you're in those regions, I would highly recommend checking them out. But also just generally market association websites have just great general tools and resources. We've definitely have looked at a lot of them to help inform our resources for Montana. So, as we start
Yeah,
to
those are great resources, Maura. Thanks for suggesting the association idea. I think that is a really great place for vendors to get started as well, and that I didn't mention earlier.
yeah, I mean, associations, they can provide there's a lot of member benefits. If they have a membership structure, they might be able to offer a discount on or market insurance. So yeah, definitely check that out. So as we are winding down our conversation, Tammy, I'm wondering, in your opinion, what are some emerging issues for farmers markets that we should maybe all be aware of, especially for listeners who might be thinking about becoming vendors or starting a market?
Yeah, I know. It sounded like you had a conversation with Blake about cooperations and how those can be an opportunity for um, new and emerging business structures. And I think that's a really great idea and and something to explore. So definitely consider listening to that conversation between Mara and Blake Lineweaver. So one thing that we're thinking about and kind of moving forward with our peer learning piece is doing regional strategic planning with markets throughout Montana. And I do see that as an exciting next step. I'm also seeing a lot of interest in cottage food and local food laws to help vendors sell processed, safe food products at markets. And it's important for vendors and market managers to be proactive in this advocacy and to understand their legal and liability considerations. So, definitely, if there is a farmers market association, that would be a really great way to keep on top of those things. But if not, just understanding what your legal and liability issues are related to some of these new local food and emerging laws.
Yeah, those are definitely important things to keep in mind especially if you're thinking about becoming a vendor or a market that might be opening up, allowing vendors to sell foods that class of food freedom laws. And for me, I just really feel that like farmers markets are going to be even more relevant and important than ever, especially as we have seen rising costs at grocery stores. I just think like really supporting our local food systems, we're going to see sort of a natural boost with that because um, you know,
Yes, local food is an important way to or probably one of the best ways to deal with, tariffs or any of those types of things that are making it challenging to access affordable food.
Yeah, I think that it's we actually have seen a little bit of, we've really seen, quite a bit of movement in Montana around this. We are just finishing up our legislative session here and really excited to see that a study bill that our food policy coalition Grow Montana has advocated for did make it through its journey through the legislature, to look at how to improve and increase in the importance of local food systems and farmers markets. So for me, that's really like indicating that our legislature, our public is really interested in supporting and learning more about local food systems. So I think that's a big win for us in Montana, and definitely something I think for people to kind of keep an eye on, and maybe think about like how they can advocate for food systems in their states as well. What do you think, Tammy?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think also just as you've mentioned before, I'm not sure in this podcast, but in our conversations about farmers markets, is that they are businesses, and they do provide economic opportunities and opportunities to build on the economies, and especially rural areas. Like, there's a lot of rural areas in Montana, and we're finding that farmers markets help in circulating local food dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. Farmers markets are legitimate businesses. I definitely say that a lot. And as a former market manager, there is nothing more rewarding than seeing a day where we had a lot of customers, a lot of vendors, seeing their displays out beautifully, and then people interacting with those displays, and then going through, at the end of the market day, checking with everybody and having them say, yeah, this was a really successful market. Like, this was great, and just seeing people happy with the success that they're having. So, they're really a vital and important piece of communities, and deserve a lot of support and respect. So I personally just so happy that we get to do this work, Tammy. And I'm just curious. We are just starting to it's just starting to feel really like spring here in Montana, and some of our markets are starting to open. So we're officially getting into market season, and I'm just curious, what are you looking forward to for our 2025 farmers market season in Montana?
Yeah, I saw this question, and it had to there's a couple of things that I'm really interested and excited about. Well, first is just seeing how this Harvest of the Month program grows, and visiting some farmers markets that are implementing it, and maybe doing some case studies, and learning from different vendors about what's working well and what we can improve on. And then, of course, I'm not sure I mentioned, but we have a homestead, so we actually grow much of our own food, but we don't have enough land to produce meat or protein, anything other than we do some broilers. So I'm also looking forward to having a venue to get some meat and protein to supplement our products that we grow on our homestead, and just seeing new and interesting products. So that's what I'm looking forward to. What about you, Mara?
I am really looking forward to, I always look forward to the National Farmers Market Week in the first week of August. And we had some conversation with our cohort members for the Harvest of the Month about, doing some sort of combined promotion around Harvest of the Month and National Farmers Market Week. So I'm excited to explore that and see what we can do. And maybe if we can, see some really good increased sales at markets around that time, I think that would be great. And Tammy, as you mentioned, you do flowers. I think just flowers at farmers markets is like one of my favorite things.
Yeah, there's some
Just
really great creative ways of selling them, like build your own bouquets and all of that stuff. So yeah,
yeah,
it is. It's great. The farmers markets are vibrant and colorful, and there's lots of really great things to check out, and I'm excited about that as well.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you again so much for joining me in this conversation. It's been so fun to recap the work that we've done over almost the last 6 years. Yeah, thank you so much, Tammy.
Well, thanks for getting us together to talk about some of the new programs and reflecting on some of the work we've been doing. And yeah, I'm excited for what's next for farmers markets in Montana and throughout the country.
Yeah, me too.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Additional information about this episode and related resources can be found at attra.incat.org. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Voices from the Field wherever you get your podcasts. ATTRA, Voices from the Field, is produced by the National Center for Appropriate Technology, headquartered in Butte, Montana. It's supported by the USDA Rural Business Cooperative Service as part of NCAT's ATTRA Sustainable Agriculture Program. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this recording are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the USDA or NCAT. We'll catch you again next week, and until then, keep on farming.